Hey, I'm Lindsay Chandler, and I'm the lead interpreter for Plano Regional Day School Program for the Deaf here in Plano ISD. And today I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how to interact with deaf individuals. Um, and so if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to give me a call either by phone or you can email me. Bye. This is going to be just a quick um, overview of things you can do while working with a deaf and hard of hearing individual. The training is developed specifically for food and nutrition services, but the information can be used in a variety of settings. A little bit about me. I'm on the site interpreting right now. My name is Lindsay Chandler, and I'm the lead interpreter for Plano Regional Day School Program for the Deaf. This will be my 16th year in the district, and I've been an interpreter for a little over 20 years. And so here's my email and my phone numbers, and please feel free to reach out and ask any questions that might come up. I am more than happy to help. I also have a deaf child, so I can give you tips on raising a deaf child too. Okay, so just like hearing people, deaf people are extremely diverse. They all have their own life experiences and backgrounds, their own preferences as to how they communicate and things like that. So this training is just meant to be a starting point, to just a platform to grow. So if you have any questions, I'm open anytime. So feel free to contact me. But this will be a good starting point. I have some true or false questions. So true or false, all deaf people can read lips. What do you think? False. So only about 30% of English words can be read on your lips without any context. So anybody else who's getting more information, they're using their context clues and things like that. But it's not always a great option to depend on solely for communication. Okay, so what does it mean to be deaf? So deafness can have a physical definition, a medical definition, where it's a hearing loss. So it can be because of an illness, or you can be born deaf. You can become deaf later in life, and just from wear and tear on your ears, as doctors tell you to be careful and not listen to loud music and things like that. Deafness is a spectrum. So you have some people that have a very mild hearing loss, and then you have some people that are profound and couldn't hear a jet engine. So that's, when you're communicating with somebody, not everybody has the same deafness. I'll use my son as an example. He has a moderate to severe hearing loss, and he, in quiet settings where he's able to sit with you one-on-one, he hears quite a bit and picks up quite a bit. But then when you add background noises or visual distractions and things like that, then his comprehension becomes less and less. So there's all different kinds of levels of hearing. Some people have technology that they use, hearing aids, cochlear implants, things like that to help compensate. But just because you see an individual using one of those does not mean that they benefit 100% and are hearing necessarily. There's also a cultural definition, and that just means that the deaf individual is an active member in deaf culture. They have, similar beliefs and behaviors and history and things like that. For instance, they'll touch to get each other's attention. Hearing people don't typically touch other hearing people to get their attention, but touching is okay. Eye contact is extremely important to them, where hearing people, you can look away and keep talking and it's fine. They are, might pound on a desk to get somebody's attention. So those are culturally deaf things. And so those are the two definitions. So one person can be deaf and have a pretty significant hearing loss, but not necessarily identify as deaf in the cultural sense. Okay. I like to play games, so if we were in person, I would give you a prize. But true or false, not all deaf people know sign language. What do you think about this one? It's true. Everybody is different. Again, I said we all have different backgrounds. Some people become deaf later in life, and so they haven't learned sign language. Some people weren't raised in a family that signed to them, so they didn't know. Some people are raised with families who sign, or put in school where they're learning sign language, and so they sign to communicate. But it depends on their preferences and what makes them successful. Okay, so if you are interacting with a deaf person, how do you communicate? The key is to be flexible and respectful, and just kind of see what works for both of y'all. You'll want to face the deaf person, and you'll remember I said eye contact is important. You'll also want to get their attention before talking. So if you're talking and they're not looking at you, they probably don't know that you're talking. And so you can tap them on the shoulder, you can flash lights, you can bang on the desk and to get their attention first, and then you can start communicating. You can use interpreters if applicable, but remember, not every deaf person can sign. And so if they don't know sign language, then you obviously wouldn't need to get an interpreter. Videos, it's important to have closed captions. But one thing to think about is ASL and sign language is a different language than English. So just like somebody whose first language is Spanish or German, they might find it very difficult to get information specifically from written English, from captions and things like that. So that's one thing to think about. Captions are great, but it's not the only thing that should be used to communicate, especially if that person struggles with reading English. Writing back and forth, if possible, is another way you can communicate with deaf people. But again, if they find it difficult to read English, then writing might not be the best option. If you are going to write, I wouldn't write like you talk and write a big narrative. You can just clear, concise, so it's communication can flow instead of taking forever. And then check for understanding. Check to make sure they're understanding you, and check to make sure that you're understanding them. And, that could be if you're asking them to do something, maybe, prompting that person to try it out and to work through whatever task they're doing first together, so you can check for understanding. If they're asking you a question or asking you to do something, then maybe walking through the process to make sure that you're understanding what they're needing as well. That's important, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Being visual, if you have a picture of something, that's great. Deaf people are really visual learners. And so if you have a process that needs to be followed, maybe having pictures with explanations and things like that is beneficial. And learning sign language is always, if the person uses sign language, is always a great plus. It goes a long way to build relationships and just to cut out some of the work stress when you can't communicate. When deaf individuals might feel pretty isolated if they're not able to have a conversation with people or ask questions when needed. So there's that. What not to do. We no longer use the term hearing impaired. So deaf or hard of hearing is how you refer to people. You don't need to yell. You don't need to talk very slowly. Any lip reading that they might be able to get, they won't get it if you're enunciating or you're moving your lips and being exaggerated with your facial expressions. Changing topics or speakers without warning is difficult, because if one person's talking and I'm trying to follow, even if you have an interpreter, I'm trying to follow what that person's saying, and immediately another person interjects and starts talking, or you change the topic quickly, that can be confusing. Pretending to know sign language and flapping your hands around, it's very offensive. It's not being respectful. And then don't avoid interacting with deaf people. They're really cool people, just like hearing people, and they have lots to offer. Also, just being mindful of your facial expressions. You don't want to, sometimes sarcasm doesn't go over really well when you're talking with a deaf person and you don't have an interpreter, because your facial expressions are sometimes they don't match the actual intent. And so that can be confusing. So maybe watch your facial expressions and your body language. Sign language uses the whole body, your hands and your facial expressions and all of that. And so deaf people key into that and they notice all of that. That's part of the message that they're getting from you. And so it can be kind of confusing when your body language and your facial expressions are conflicting with what you're saying. So be mindful of that. Here's another true or false. Sign language is the same wherever you travel. False. So just like spoken languages, in other countries, they use different sign systems. So we have Mexican Sign Language and British Sign Language. And then even just within the United States, people in the North sometimes sign faster than the people in the South. Or there's different signs for the same thing. There's probably 10 different signs for happy birthday. And so it changes depending on where you are. So one of the best ways to improve your experience is just to make an effort to communicate. So learning signs, to be able to communicate, hearing people, we chit chat all the time at work, and we learn about each other's dogs or jobs in the evening or families, or, when you're not feeling well, things like that. Well, when a deaf person is working in a world of hearing people, they don't always get that opportunity to build relationships because of communication. So any way that you can communicate by, showing a picture of your dog or videos or things like that, writing back and forth, just taking an extra couple seconds to stop what you're doing and to look at the deaf individual and make sure communication happens. And learning sign language, there's a lot of simple phrases you can learn, and there's lots of resources out there to pick up sign language. So that's be great for building relationships and improving everybody's work experience. Here's just some few resources. The first link is from Jamaica, but good information in communicating with deaf people. The NAD is a good resource. And then to learn sign language, lifeprint.com has a lot of free lessons, and he's a deaf teacher, and it's very clear. My husband used it, and my husband's family used it, so they could communicate with our son, and it helped quite a bit. And then social media, there's lots of different accounts to follow on social media that will teach you sign language. So, and then you can obviously contact me. If you have any questions, again, please reach out, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.